I'm really excited to do our first site-specific meeting of our Brownfields grant that you'll be learning about this evening. My name is Leah Thill, and I'm with MACOG. We're the Michiana Area Council of Governments. And we're convening this presentation as part of a grant that we received from the EPA. And we've used some of those funds on the Ward Bakery building. And we actually had a meeting last month where we just talked overall about the grant and how it can help redevelop blighted properties. But this evening is all about the Ward Bakery building in South Bend. So hopefully you've come to the right place. And I'll go ahead and introduce the rest of our team members. So as part of our grant, we have contracted with an environmental firm out of Indianapolis and some of their subcontractors. It's Metric Environmental as the primary consultant. We have Roberts Environmental, Revitalize Communities, Resite Development, and Woolpert that are all working together with us. So for the sake of time, because we have such a big team, I'm not going to introduce them to you individually right now. You'll hear from all of those folks later on throughout the presentation. And there are a few other folks that you may be familiar with here, and I'll go ahead and let Tim introduce himself from the city of South Bend. And some of you may know him, but for those of you who don't, if you want to say hi, Tim, and explain your role with the city.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Corcoran. I'm the Director of Planning for the city. I'm here tonight because part of the Ward Bakery building is an important part of this neighborhood, and it's also been a key element of the Near Northwest neighborhood plan that has recently been published on our website. So I'm here to just give a little context to that.
Great. And then we also have Kathy. Kathy, you want to say hi? Most people probably know you, but if they don't, this is a good opportunity to say hi.
Sure. Okay. Hello, everybody. Kathy Schuth. I'm a neighbor in the NNN on Leland Avenue, but also the executive director at Near Northwest Neighborhood, the Neighborhood Community Development Corporation. And I'm looking forward to chiming in a little bit about some of the history of work that we've attempted to do on the Ward Bakery that has come and gone, but also some of the vision that we've heard for the building in that time.
Great. And last, we have members of the development team for the Ward Bakery building. Mike, if you want to introduce your group. You may be muted.
Mike, you're muted.
Or Greg.
I always forget to do that. Hey, and Monty, if you want to say something in a sec too. I'm Mike Keene. I'm part of the bakery group. We have 4 partners, me and Dwayne Borkholder. We've been of Borkholder Building and New Energy Homes. We've been doing the work around what we call Portage Midtown and doing the development there. In this particular project, Greg Kill has joined us and Monty Anderson. And I saw Monty on the thing there, but Greg, Monty, you want to just say a quick hi?
Hey, Mike. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight.
Greg, why don't you just give a little bit, 2 sentences on your background?
Yes, I'm principal in charge of Kiel Architecture and Planning, and familiar with some of the challenges of the Ward Bakery building from the previous developers that looked at the project. I know with the NNN and Kathy, and unfortunately they weren't able to land the tax credits for the sort of mixed use housing project. So our plan is to, look at the building, try and work with the building as best as possible, and develop it as a mixed use cultural center, dealing with potential tenant use, but working with the building after understanding it. And I think at this point, Monty, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, Monty is really the person who is responsible for us taking this on. He's done this before, and quite frankly, without Monty, we would not have stepped up. But because of his support and his vision, we've been able to put this group together. So Monty?
That's nice, Mike. I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Mike, that's for sure. We wouldn't even be in South Bend. But I'm Monty Anderson. I'm an incremental developer in Southern Dallas, Texas. And normally I never go outside of my city to do any work, but I'm part of an organization, a nonprofit organization called Incremental Development Alliance. We've been working with small developers in South Bend for quite a number of years. And I kind of fell in love with South Bend and its people, and therefore hooked up with Mike and Greg and Dwayne and Tim Corcoran, lots of people there, Marty Mecklenburg and people like that. And just a lot of people there that we've gotten to know. It's made me want to come and work there. I think it's a good project. Greg said it all. It's more than just a real estate deal. It should be a cultural center with lots of different uses and become a neighborhood hub for that neighborhood. And so I'm glad to be here tonight with all you guys from South Bend.
Thanks for joining us. So now we don't have time. We have about 40 people with us right now. So we don't have time to have you all introduce yourselves individually, but we do want to hear from you. You should have seen a poll pop up just now, but kind of where do you best fit in this conversation? Are you here because you're an NNN resident, or you live in South Bend, but outside the NNN, or do you play another role in the sphere here? If we didn't really describe you in these options, go ahead and type it in the chat box as well. That's an option. And feel free throughout, if you have any questions that pop up, we may not answer them until a later section, but we will try to get to those at the very end of the presentation. All right, so we have mostly NNN residents, which is great. So hopefully we answer a lot of your questions. As Kathy did previously, I probably should have gave a disclaimer that I'm also an NNN resident. I live about a block away from the building in question, just kind of a confluence of interests here. But generally MACOG works throughout the entire region and is not at all limited just to South Bend. All right, so we have a second poll question here. So if you are a resident, that was most of you, how long have you been in the neighborhood? That'll give us a good idea of your context, your expectations, how long you've been involved. It looks like most folks actually don't live in the neighborhood, but own or rent or property or have a business. So that's interesting. And then a pretty significant number of people, less than 2 years. So you're very new to the neighborhood. And then on the other end, pretty significant number of you that have been here for a decade or more. So that's definitely interesting. So hopefully we will be sharing something that's relevant to all of you, whether this is a new home for you or you've been staring at this building since maybe it was even an active business. So first, just a quick snapshot about our Brownfields grant that MACOG has. MACOG is a regional planning organization, and we cover this 4-county region that's shown on the slides. And so each of the counties are our coalition members that applied for this grant. And we received $600,000, and it's to be used for environmental assessments and for planning for cleanup and reuse. So we, just the way the grants are structured, we're not able to use any of that for actual removing soil or abatement of any kind. But we're able to leverage that to test and find if there's contamination on a site and how we can plan to remediate that or limit exposure. Or sometimes there are sites that we consider them brownfields because they have a stigma, but they may actually not be contaminated. And it can be really helpful to move a site forward for redevelopment by identifying that it's those issues aren't as big of an issue for the site. We have about 20 sites we're working on right now, and we're continuing to accept new sites. This kind of shows the distribution throughout the region. Right now, we have most of our sites in the city of Elkhart and the city of Warsaw. And for those of you who were not on our September presentation, where we went a lot more in depth into the brownfields topic, here's a snapshot of what typical brownfields might look like, but they're often abandoned properties of an industrial or commercial nature, a lot of dry cleaners, old gas stations that might have leaking tanks. They're often located at a community gateway or downtown or somewhere where it has a lot of visual impact on the neighborhood. And often they're blighted. So the goal of the grant is to catalyze the redevelopment by being able to identify environmental issues and help manage those as part of moving a redevelopment process forward. Because a lot of times there's not it takes a lot of time, extra time because it's a brownfield, and it may require extra money. So the grant helps kind of address those two issues. We also have a regional brownfields inventory that's on our website. And as it mentions here, we do investigations that fall into several categories, and we won't go into those details this evening. But later on, Metric Environmental will be kind of explaining the results of the assessments that we performed for this building. All right, so that's my quick snapshot on the environmental side. So I'm going to turn it over to Yolanda. So we didn't have you introduce yourself earlier, so feel free to kind of explain your role and take it away.
Hello, my name is Yolanda Boucher, and I'm the president of Revitalized Communities. That is a community and economic development company. My role in this team is reuse planning and community relations. I retired last year from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Midwest region, and I retired as the chief of brownfields for EPA and land redevelopment. Before then, I was the regional community involvement regional community involvement chief. I'm happy to bring this background to help this project and have meaningful community involvement, as well as with the others on the MACOG team that we've partnered with. Now, brownfields redevelopment. Why should we redevelop brownfields? Brownfield redevelopment. Could we go to the next slide? Brownfield redevelopment is a crucial tool to building resilient, productive, and welcoming communities. It does it in several ways. One, it meets community needs. We can adapt it to the things that this community actually needs. It preserves the community character and history, like the Ward building. It's been a landmark in the community for quite a while. It mitigates blight in the neighborhood, and it can increase the local tax base, facilitate job growth, mitigate public health concerns, and promote infill. Next slide. So here are just a few of examples of reuse for brownfields. This one is an abandoned gas station that's been turned into a community park in Silver Lake. We also have an old bakery that was turned to a Subway restaurant, an old NIPSCO site to Goshen Brewing Company, in Goshen, Indiana. These are just some of the options, and reuse options bring jobs and recreation to the community. I'm sure the end product of the Ward Bakery building will bring outstanding benefits to the near Northwest neighborhood. Next slide. Now, this is just one of the first steps towards forming a partnership between the community and those developers and future tenants of what is now known as the Ward Bakery building. What does that partnership look like? How do you involve a community in this process? Well, the first step is which is continual, is education. Today, we're sharing education in the form of community plans. We'll discuss the current status of the building, the state of how the building is constructed, and we'll talk about developer interest. After we do that, we'll start looking at how do we do community visioning. We'll take a look at your hopes and dreams, and hopefully you'll give us clear input individually, and then we can take this information and try to do a cohesive look at how you think this building should be used. We'll prioritize the hopes and dreams that you come up with, and then we'll look at the market itself. What is missing? What do you already have in the area? And how it can be supported through the customers and the actual tenants in the building. Once we do that, once we do that, we have to weigh all the consideration. And as this graphic shows, the community vision is at the center. We want to meet your needs, but we also have to look at financial considerations. How much does it cost to get this building up and going and utilized the way you'd like to see it? And who's going to actually rent it out? What does that rent cost? We have to look at logistical considerations. Can this building be built out to the way that to fit the needs of the community in the way that you'd like to see it. What is the process in that? And does it make sense through the financial considerations? And finally, and also the not final, but probably beginning, the structural considerations. Can this building support what you're looking at? And we'll discuss that throughout the process of forming your vision and the developers working on it, making it fit the vision in the best way that we possibly can. As you can see, it takes a team, it takes a partnership, and we're hoping to guide you through that process. Next, we have Keith Veal. We work together on reuse planning, and he will go over more information on community involvement and the whole redevelopment process. Keith Veal.
Okay, there we go. Good evening, all. Thank you, Yolanda. Thanks to all of the stakeholders who have taken time out of their busy evening to be engaged in this this rather unusual public meeting. This is the third of a series of public meetings that that I've engaged in with MACOG, with this team. And I will tell you, I am a people person. I like to be moving. So if I appear a bit antsy, it's because I feel confined sitting in this seat, talking to my computer screen, trying to see and engage with an audience that right now is only 4 people. So at least the 4 that I can see on my screen. But at any rate, Keith Veal, I am the president of Recite Development. Recite is an amalgam of my passions. I have a passion for the environment. I have a passion for brownfields, particularly brownfields redevelopment, and I have a passion for community development. And so all of this began back in the mid-90s for me when I went to work for IDEM. I was a part of the group of staffers who created the state's program. And it's 1994, and I have been entrenched in brownfields redevelopment ever since, working with communities throughout actually throughout the Midwest, doing what I call spreading the gospel according to Keith. And the central theme of that gospel, if you will, is the brownfields philosophy at its core. At its core, the brownfields program is a real estate program with an environmental component. Now, the environmental component is important, but for the brownfield practitioner, it is vitally important that we keep people focused on the end goal. And that is why we say, and I'm sure maybe you've heard in the brownfields vernacular, begin with the end in mind. And so how does that happen conceptually? Conceptually, it happens as a result of these 3 things that you see on the screen: planning, environmental, and then ultimately redevelopment. And so the planning component, when I go into communities and I talk about brownfields redevelopment and I actually do development projects, the plan, I look for community plans as really as a means to tell me what the will of this community is to support brownfields redevelopment. And so as a part of the metric team working with MACOG, it was a very good thing to see that you guys have already put the work in on the planning. There are more than 25 plans that I've gone through that covers, comprehensive, regional approaches all the way down to, site-specific neighborhood plans. And so the planning is essentially the roadmap. It is the begin with the end in mind. It shows us a picture of our community, the way we want to see it, as opposed to the way that it currently is. And that is the inspiration for engaging in the rest of the process. And so my role in this, if it's not obvious, as a developer of brownfield properties, is to work with the team, work with MACOG, work with you to guide this process, working with the developers, working with the economic development professionals, working with community to better understand what the environmental conditions are on a particular piece of property. And then take that information along with that end-use vision, marry those two so that we bring the right amount of environmental mitigation to accommodate the end-use goals. So that's what this is all about. The right amount of environmental mitigation to accommodate the end-use goals. And it's done in such a way, and I use those words very, very strategically, very purposefully, right amount of environmental attention in terms of liability. So we absolutely want to focus on preventing exposure in any way that it exists. And you do that by really understanding what the end use goal is. And that's how this process gets accelerated. It becomes seamless when we have an understanding, a clear vision through the planning, those efforts that you guys have been engaged in. We have the developer, the architect that stepped up and says, this is what the vision looks like. And so we kind of work backwards to make sure that vision is accommodating to those environmental conditions on the site. And then the actual redevelopment piece is where all of those factors come together, where the vision for the community as expressed through the plans that you guys have been engaged in. The architect and the developer have put their blood, sweat, and tears into making the vision a reality. And then, it's understanding, as Yolanda alluded to, understanding those markets. Because at the end of the day, in order for the end use vision to be a sustainable one, to be a sustainable solution, all of these factors, from the planning, the environmental, the redevelopment, they all have to work together. And they have to work together in such a way that the overall viability, the overall possibilities that are represented in that vision are real. They can be actualized, they can be supported, and they can be sustained. And so, as again, Yolanda pointed out, this network of professionals that we have engaged in this process, we're here to do just that. We're here to ensure that for every single project that is on your radar, that becomes a part of this process, the planning, the environmental, the redevelopment process, what results is a sustainable development, one that represents everything that you want it to be for your community. It is the vision for your community that you can support. It's environmentally sustainable, it's economically sustainable, and it represents what the architect and the developer so badly want it to be for themselves and for the community. So that's what we're here to do. And despite the fact that we're engaged in this Zoom meeting, this has really been a fun time. Thank you again for your patience and for being engaged.
Wonderful. Thanks, Keith and Yolanda, for kind of explaining your role in this. And they're also involved in the broader regional project where we are working on a number of different sites. So now we are going to give you a little, I guess this is the big unveil, so I don't want to steal any thunder here, but I'll just turn it over to Tim and then Kathy to talk about the recent NNN plan.
Thanks, Leah. Not so recent in some ways, but we've been doing a lot of work in the NNN since 2018, 2019, when we first brought Monty and Incremental Development Alliance into the NNN. which is where they saw the building. But also, many of you may have participated in the NNN planning process, which started in February, March of 2019 and went through April. So as part of that plan, we looked at a lot of things around and that are important to the neighborhood. And without getting into a whole lot of detail about the plan itself, because I'll put a link in the chat box for everybody to go and download it for yourself. I wanted just to focus on the Ward Bakery building. So one of the things that was very important as we looked through the neighborhood was to identify key opportunity sites throughout the neighborhood that could develop if it was vacant, or redevelop if it was a existing building. And the Ward Bakery was possibly, I think, one of the #1 buildings that we had identified as something that really could be reused in a way that, in a creative way, that became a real focal point for the neighborhood. Along with the 800 block, which is of Portage, which is the grassy block just to the south of the Ward Bakery building, which is a city-owned property. So, the plan really focused in on these opportunity sites, and a lot of the neighborhood strategy and the guiding principles. One of the main guiding principles is that we should reinforce that neighborhood center node at Portage Avenue and look at the adaptive reuse of the Ward Bakery building and investigate the opportunities to build on the vacant lots in the node so that we can really create that focal point that's already there. I mean, Kathy's, the NNN Community Center, the local cup, there's already energy in this part of your neighborhood, and I think as Mike and his team work towards the adaptive reuse of this building, it's only going to make that energy even stronger. And I think it's going to be a real focal point for the NNN that I hope, as people drive up and down Portage every day, see it as kind of a beacon, along with the big red chair, that people will take some more interest in looking into this part of our city. The image that you see there is one of the artist's renderings of Portage and California intersection, and the Ward Bakery prominently in the background. And this is, by design. Even the planners and the architects that we had involved in the charrette process, where we went through looking at these opportunity sites, also really latched on to the building and loved it. And I think, like Monty, when you sort of see it for the first time, that I think, and we hope, people look at it as an opportunity, and that's what the plan really wanted to drive home in terms of this particular part of your neighborhood. Like I said, I don't want to really go into the rest of it. This is about the Ward Bakery, but I'm gonna, right after I'm done talking, I'm gonna drop a link into the chat box so everybody can go to the city website. There's a PDF there to download, 2 PDFs. One is the plan itself, and then there's a lot of appendices that go with it. So I'll pass it back to Leah.
Great. Thanks, Tim, for being with us. And those of you who are joining us live are going to have the first opportunity to see this plan. So that's great that was able to be put online. I'm also going to share another poll before we have Kathy talk, just following up on the idea of planning and community involvement. I'm curious what you all have been involved in the past, if you were part of developing the NNN plan, dating back to 2013, where the NNN put together the quality of life plan. That was a pretty intensive process.
And go to
Let's see, let me
here.
get our mute. I'm just kind of curious what your level of involvement has been. That helps us understand, what your expectations are, or your knowledge of things that have been tried and maybe not worked out. And Kathy will kind of explain more of some of those attempts. I think we have, we're slowing down here on the responses. So I'm going to go ahead and end the polling here. We're at a minute. Interestingly, a lot of you have not ever participated in any of these plans, so this is all fresh to you. We got a lot of folks that have been part of the Incremental Development Alliance meetings, and about a third of you participated in actually developing the latest 2020 plan that Tim mentioned. So there are the results. And Kathy, if you want to kind of talk about, the NNN's role in previous attempts to develop the Ward Bakery building and kind of where that left off.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Leah, and I recognize that there are many neighbors on this call that have walked this road for a long time. And like you said, I've been watching this building both as an opportunity and and often as an eyesore. During that time, I just saw Becky write in that she was part of planning processes in the neighborhood in the 90s. And I was actually handed a document out of the files today, a handwritten document from 1976 from Mary Grace Minkler, stating how the neighborhood association should be put together. And one of the things that reflects is Mary Grace worked at Minkler Hardware in the building that our current neighborhood association and a community development corporation sits in, as well as the Van Buren Market. So that corner, as the legacy of being a vibrant commercial retail corner, as Tim said, and to see this level of detail and attention and planning to it, and that it's not a lost cause is I think remains very exciting in the neighborhood. There's been a lot of, I would say, like residential rehab happening in the Chapin Park area and in the historic districts around this area. And then our organization has done a lot of residential work just to the kind of surrounding this area, but we haven't really been able to tackle this one. Of course, it started as the bakery in, like 1919, and then it had expansions, and that corner site was a garage that was added onto it in, I think, the 40s. And then its kind of latest actual use was as a vending machine distribution company, the Ford Distribution Company. And so it had been a kind of like minor use for its last years, and then basically abandoned for all intents and purposes. I saw that Dustin New was on this call, and Dustin actually has a longer history of trying to go for low income housing tax credits for this project. He was working on that with the NNN before I became executive director. But our background on that is that we applied 6 times to try to go after tax credit funding to take this building over and convert it into low income housing, and which there were various iterations of that, some of which included commercial space and some of which was entirely residential, some of which included the vacant land to the south where the strip mall, that little strip center, had been torn down in the 800 block, and some of which didn't. And I have to say, it's like the roller coaster of emotions that I think neighbors went with on that, and worried about parking and worried about the building and excited for it, wanting it to preserve its character. All of those things came out in those planning processes. But one of the things that we did find out is that highly competitive process, it's really hard to have a pet project because you're going against developers that can choose projects where, wherever is most prime in the state. So we seem to lose out on each competitive process by only a few points, but those points mattered. I will say, just from like a personal point of view, to see the expertise that the city has brought in for this neighborhood plan and bringing in Opticos and bringing in Incremental Development Alliance, is pretty incredible for me to see really the high level of standard of experts that have been invited into our shared neighborhood to look at this. And now to see that Mike Keene, that Monty, that Greg, that your team, that Dwayne, that you are looking at this, I think really hits all of the discussions that I first started hearing in like the 2013 NNN a quality of life plan, which really highlighted this bakery building as kind of a pressing need, but also then continued through this neighborhood planning process. And I realized if I were to preempt, like the community conversations that came up throughout all that time, even when we were looking at this the tax credit process, I would hear from people saying, hey, apartments are great, but we really would love to see this as a vibrant retail, social, commercial place, like a place where people could really engage with it. And that was something difficult to do through the tax credit process. So to have it being looked at as a private development opens up most of the opportunities, I think, in such a refreshing and wonderful organic way that we really even weren't able to do going through kind of like governmental programs. And so in some ways, this move is potentially, hopefully, if we can support you guys, like the ideal of what I was hearing from all the meetings that I've attended to now. And maybe I'll just stop it there, but it's beautiful to see how many of these ideas have come together. And I think that the idea that's coming forward in this development really hits a lot of the marks that came up in those planning processes.
Great. Thanks so much, Kathy, for providing that background and kind of connecting the past and the way back up till the present. I think we'll leave some of the questions about traffic, intersection improvements and traffic calming to later, because I really want to make sure we give plenty of time to Mike and his team to talk. So we already did our poll, so we're just going to go right into the Portage Midtown Vision. Mike, it's stage is yours.
Okay, why don't we move to the next slide, just so I see where we're headed. First of all, I want to thank Leah for all the work she's been doing. It's wonderful to have her as a neighbor. It's even more wonderful to have her at MACOG. She is just an amazing organizer and has just so great to work with. I also want to thank Tim Corcoran and the city of South Bend. We've really, economic development, city planning office, the mayor's office, city council, we found them to just be wonderful to work with. As we all sort of learn what the challenges are to try to redevelop these neighborhoods in the sort of, first circle outside the downtown. And the city has been really a terrific partner. I also want to thank the Metric team, Keith and Yolanda and Vince. The environmental work that they've been doing has been stellar. We wish they would have not found everything they did, but it's there, and we need to know it. They've done really terrific work. And then finally, I really want to thank all of the neighbors who are joining us and taking a look at this project with us. A few years ago, probably a year and a half ago, when we were taking a look at this building and Kathy and I were talking, we owned a couple of properties that were adjacent, and they needed them in order to have parking in order to get their tax credit grant going. And of course, we said we would make those available to you. I was really hoping that the NNN was going to get the tax grant for this. Simply because, number one, they have left their guts on the floor over the last 6 years, and they've worked with some great people. But second of all, this thing was a big lift. And I had said, well, if this doesn't get done this time, I said to Kathy, then I think we need to militate to knock it down, clean it up, and then we can approach it one lot at a time, and we can do that. But Monty came up, and Jim Kuhlman with the Incremental Development Alliance, and they saw the building and they just said, this is too good a building to leave. And it really should be turned into a kind of a community center. And when the NNN didn't get the grant, tax credit grant, I think it was like last October 7th, maybe at 11:00 a.m., Kathy called me and said, we didn't get it, Mike. And I called Monty up and I said, Monty, they didn't get it. Are you in? And Monty said, yes, I am. And I said, okay, I guess we're going to try to go for this. And eventually Greg joined us. And the reason we were interested in doing this is because Dwayne and I have already been working in and around, and you've seen some of the work we've done on Portage, to do this incremental development, beginning with renovating some the old flower shop and the electronic supply store and a cottage just south of that. We'd also picked up some lots. We thought this was going to start out to just sort of build one energy efficient home that produces as much energy as it used, but there was just sort of a mission creep, and it continued to grow. and it became what we call Portage Midtown. And in order to develop Portage Midtown, there's a few basic principles that we're following that we've really learned from Incremental Development Alliance. One is, incremental development is about coming into a neighborhood and committing to that neighborhood for the rest of your life. And starting a little bit at a time. And this is, Monty is the founder. He's the pioneer of this movement. So to have him here, part of this is amazing. But the idea is that when you first start to do a house or you build something in a neighborhood like this, you're probably going to be underwater and you're not going to be able to flip it if you want to do a good job. But if you're able to sort of build it, what we call pro forma based building, we see what the market would bear. In one of Monty's cases, he started out with tents on a sidewalk along a street that now has a multi-commercial plex on it that he lives in. So you got to figure out where you can start. Fortunately, because of the great work that was done by Kathy and also others are our neighbors. I see Joni and I see Steve here and Sarah and John and Brooke are with us. People have already renovated houses in addition to the 100 properties done by the NNN. This neighborhood was just really ready, for the next step. And so that's why we were able to come in here. And the goal of incremental development, and that's why I was so resonant with them, is to create wealth in neighborhoods for neighborhoods. Let's go to the next slide. So here's a map that we're kind of looking at. This is, we're sort of looking at, actually we have we're updated, we're looking at a 4-phase process. We've got 5 phases here. But what we're looking at is sort of what we call a farm. And this is where we get from incremental development. It's kind of, typical developer will come in, does a development, takes their margin and walks away. Well, a farmer doesn't come into a field, grow 1 year on some clayey soil and then move to another one the next year. They keep on going, and in year 6, year 7, year 8, year 10, it gets better and better. And that's the approach we have here. If you take a look at this map, you'll see the dark blue is some work that we've already done in collaboration with Habitat. We were able to put up the 5 energy efficient homes that produce almost as much electricity as they use. Leah lives in one of them. It's got solar on them, great stuff. That's what got us here. And then you can see we also did a couple of renovations. Then our next phase that we're looking at is the bakery. And that's really, working on that, and we're looking to start that now. And then a 3rd phase we're going to be looking at is really doing below the bakery. We've got the vacant lots across there in the triangle. And we, hope after the bakery is done that we can jump across the street and reestablish some residential and perhaps a little commercial on the corner, but reestablish some residential on those places. And then you'll see some sort of turquoise and lighter purple. That's actually, we've collapsed that into what we call our 4th phase. That's kind of residential infill. We're looking at doing a couple of tiny houses on the 2 little squares that you see just to the south of Portage there. NNN, we've sold them some of the lots that we picked up, and they're looking at doing a 4-plex on Cushing, corner Cushing and Rex, and a duplex up there north of DeMaude, and a single family on Rex. You can see the purple there. We're also going to be doing some smaller cottages and a court on South Cushing, and doing some other kinds of infill. You'll see that there are a whole lot more lots, or probably about as many lots that are in orange, what we call ancillary parcels. We do not own those. We do not intend to own those. We are not looking to own those. So for those neighbors who own those properties, we have that in the farm because part of our goal is to be able to improve the farm for everybody. So as we build up and we're able to sort of get the value to the place where we can afford to actually build new and pay for what we're building and make it work, we want the neighbors to be able to have the same kinds of benefits. And that's the idea of incremental development, is rather than trying to come in and own everything, what we want to do is take a part of it, but we also want to collaborate with neighbors. And quite frankly, if there's new people wanting to move into the neighborhood, we've got one developer out on West Rex, there, on the east part of Rex there, that turquoise one. That's a developer that we've been working with who's going to come in and perhaps do a multi-generational complex there. If somebody wants to sort of follow our values and use our building system, we're willing to work with them to do that. And so we've had some help with that. Let's go to the next one. So you can see some of the stuff that, this is what the neighborhood looked like just about 3 years ago. If you would have walked through the neighborhood, you would have seen onto the bottom right there, the old flower shop. That was a mess and junk all over it. And then left of it was the electronics shop. And further to the right, further on Cushing, we had that old cottage there. And if you walk down along California, you'd see vacant lots and stuff like that. Quite frankly, it was not a very comfortable place to walk through. And one of the reasons we got involved in this is that when Dwayne and I started doing the net zero homes that we were doing on Shetterly Triangle and with Habitat, we felt that who's going to want to pay for these homes and live here if they've got these other things they've got to work around. So we started to get engaged in this, and things just kind of, the mission kind of creeped. But what we've done in the last 2.5 years is, let's go to the next slide. We've been able to, incrementally begin to invest in these properties. And basically learning from people like Monty. Monty has been our main mentor. How do you do something like this? Well, by partnering with Habitat rather than developing Shetterly Triangle, we were able to actually get some residential houses, get 5 of them on the triangle there way sooner than we thought. We thought we were going to be able to build one, and that would take a long time to be able to get to another just because of the appraisal gaps. And then with them doing the work of building the houses, and we were able to do that in part because of collaboration with the NNN, having provided us with 3 lots. We were able to focus on a flower shop first, and you can see there just what a difference that made. And then once we finished that, we moved next to it to the electronics store, and then we moved to the cottage. Now, the thing about incremental development is that at this point in time, we probably could not sell any of these properties for what we owe on them. But our rents are actually covering what we need to cover the expenses. And so that's that commit for a long period of time. Once we get the bakery done, we'll get to these to the point where, we just want to do what Kathy has talked about is stabilization, get to a point where we can afford to, sell or rent the properties in our neighborhood, us and all of our neighbors, for what it costs us to build and maintain them. That's kind of where we're headed. Okay, let's go on to the next. So the elephant in the room was always this thing, right? We all walk past it. And, for me and most of you are here who walk to the local cup, we walk past this thing, we don't even think about it. But I was talking to the economic developer, Niles, their head of economic development, about 2 years ago when we were talking about what we were doing in our neighborhood. And I talked about Portage area and along here, and her response was yuck. That's what she said when we talked about developing on the corner of Portage and Rex in California. She said yuck because she had a friend who lived here. And I said, you know what? There's a lot going on in this neighborhood. There's a lot of good stuff here. There's something really happening. And her response was yuck. Well, for those of us who live in this neighborhood, it's not yuck. As a matter of fact, listening to and seeing all the people around here has made me even more excited and more confident in what we're doing. You take on a project like this, it's kind of like, whoa. Now, Monty used to be a motorcycle guy. He used to ride motorcycles. He used to come to Redbud and ride motorcycles. He needs that adrenaline. He loves that stuff. I told Monty, he must have been dragging me along because we, and we got Greg into and Dwayne, and it's like, you take on something like this, it's like, whoa. But we really feel very confident. And the reason we feel pretty confident is because of this neighborhood. This is not something we'd be doing if it weren't for the work all of you have been doing and what's happened in this neighborhood up to going on. Go to the next, please. So what we're planning to do as we do this, phase 1 is going to be to stabilize the building. We've got a significant amount of environmental abatement to do, and they're going to talk about what that is. We want to make sure first and foremost that this building is safe and is healthy for our neighbors and anybody that comes through it. And over time, we're going to want to sort of save the facade, particularly the older part of the facade. The newer part, which is the part on the left, we're going to largely keep that facade, but we're going to want to open up some windows in there because we want to be able to have people see into the street. And the goal is to put some small retail along the front. But what we need to do is the roof needs to be replaced, the building needs to be cleaned out, the abatement needs to be done. We need to make it weatherproof, and then we need to get some water, some electricity, and some heat in there. But we're hoping if everything goes well, that perhaps by late next summer, we're going to be able to start building out for our first tenants. And let's go to the next, please. And this is kind of, where the neighborhood comes in and where the community comes in. Our goal is to create a kind of business, cultural, arts, and retail center with a little bit of we hope, some kind of food service there, small cafe or something along those lines, wine bar, maybe we can get a small bakery. There's an interesting history I won't go into now, but we'll learn more about it. This bakery building was the beginning of the end of artisanal bakers, small bakers in the United States, and we want to bring them back. So what's really important for here is what can we bring to this space? And one of the things that Monty talks about is whatever we bring needs to be legendary. So I'm going to stop there just for a second and quickly give Monty and Greg a chance to say whatever they want to say. And then I think Leah will take it back from there.
Thanks, Mike. I'll just say a few words. I know that when I look at the Ward Bakery building along Portage, to realize the facade, and maybe Leah, if you can go back to that main facade slide, please. To be able to see the natural light, the brick infill removed and new windows in, to activate the street front, to provide the new entrances for those tenant spaces. That's really, I think, the key transformation. And then to work with the rest of the building to make it viable and useful for the mix of potential tenants, with access on the north side, the alley side, and then opening up to the South Plaza, I think is to me how this building will really function and engage and serve as an anchor for in a hub for the community in this neighborhood.
Go to the next slide so Monty can talk.
So, Mike, so here's an interesting thing about this building. From the first time I saw it, and we were having one of the community meetings with Incremental Development across the street, is that which is very similar to one I just completed, which is about twice as big as this one. It was 110,000 square feet. Mike and Gabrielle came down and visited the building in Dallas. But the building here's an old industrial building surrounded by a neighborhood. And so with that old industrial zoning, imagine this for a moment. Imagine a bakery running again. Imagine office space, a place for the employees to work out, a place where a little welding and carpentry could be done for the building and to keep the building running. Imagine a coffee shop. Imagine a place to go after work to have a drink. Imagine a place where I could get my hair cut, Imagine for a moment a place where we could have accounting and legal, like the old plant, right? Can you imagine the bakery running like that with all those things, the whole community and the bank in the building? Now imagine it is 60 different businesses. And so the building that I did in Dallas was a wax paper manufacturing facility, and it's where wax paper was invented, and right in my neighborhood. I didn't know that when we started. And then when you break it up into those small pieces, what happens is you have small little spaces that are neighborhood spaces. There's no Bed Bath & Beyond. There's no big franchise stores in here. There's no Victoria's Secret in here, any of that kind of stuff. All of that stuff, if you notice today, is going out of business. But the stuff that's not going out of business are those basic neighborhood services, the basic things that make our quality of life in a neighborhood work every day. Those things are continuing to thrive. And in fact, in my territory, those kind of buildings have done very well post-COVID. And so if you can make a space small enough, whatever your neighborhood is, so every neighborhood's got a price, that people can pay for rent, whether it's $1,000 or $2,000 or $500 or $250, because I've got some spaces that start at $150 to $250. And if you can then decide what that price is that the neighborhood can afford. For instance, there's a chef somewhere in South Bend who works at a big hotel, probably works 80, 90 hours a week, working her really hard, and that always wanted their own restaurant. So this is a perfect place where they could come in and have a small little restaurant, maybe 750 square feet or 800 square feet, that would cost maybe less than $2,000 a month or something, all finished out and ready to go. And so what you're doing is looking for people in the neighborhood who have these crafts, and skills who want to go into business in their neighborhood where they can maybe walk to work. And so you bring the scale. Now you got the price that you can afford in the neighborhood for locals to build wealth, for locals to start their own businesses, for people that have always wanted to try it and never been able to because the entry point was too high, the entry point. And so now you bring it down to the size. So when you know the dollar, you bring it down to the size. And then you don't have to have the tax credits and the big subsidies and things like that. I mean, it'd be nice to have a few things here, but I wouldn't, I don't like to count on it, and it's surrounded by neighborhoods already. So we really didn't need apartments in it because we have residential all around it. And apartments, when you mix with retail and office, it gets really complicated. It's very expensive. And so the system that we have is a self-sustaining system. I like to call it a collaborator village. So you get to see each other, you work with each other. Somebody does graphic design, somebody's got a restaurant, somebody can build furniture, somebody might make cupcakes for the restaurant. All of these things, you begin to work together and it becomes this cultural hub, as Greg talked about earlier, where it self-propels on itself and it causes this ripple effect, which you have many of them going in South Bend right now, starting with Mike and all the friends that he mentioned earlier and many more. There's many more right now going in South Bend. It's kind of an amazing place, in my opinion, and people don't know it yet. People haven't seen it yet, but that's what we're going to do here. That's not what we're going to try to do. That's what it'll do. And that's how you make the numbers work. You scale it down in size till the numbers work to make it support itself, where it doesn't depend on the government or nonprofits or other things to fund itself. And then people can do it themselves. And businesses, see, I believe that you have lots of entrepreneurs there, small entrepreneurs, and what they need mostly is a place to try it out, place to try the business, not to go to, not to have to learn, but, I was like this, give me a snow cone, give me a lemonade stand to start with, and then I could learn the business. I couldn't learn the business in school. I was not one of those kind of learners. I had to get into the place and start making mistakes so I could learn the business at that point. And so that's what this is all about. And so it doesn't matter what I think or Mike thinks or Greg, it doesn't matter what we think. What matters is what the market thinks, what this neighborhood thinks, what the neighborhood and the market say to put in here, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to create the environment where the neighborhood can express itself and make it better quality of life.
And so let me just kind of sort of tail on that. And we've got this next slide, and Leah's going to give us a chance of feedback. What makes this building work is not me, Monty, Dwayne, and Greg. It's the neighborhood. It's the community. It's South Bend. We don't want this just to be a neighborhood center. We want this to be a South Bend center, just like Rami has done at Langlap and David's done over at Vested Interests. We've got all these neighborhoods, and we want to really support each other. So we need not only your ideas, but we need your connections. If you know anybody who might be looking for a space, interested in trying to create something, wanting to move into a neighborhood, have them contact me, because we're starting to look out right now for what the potential tenants will be in a year. So Leah.
This is your chance to provide feedback in an interactive manner. So hopefully you all will bear with us and give this a try. So please, on your computer or cell phone, go to www.polev.com/maycog1800. And whoa, wow. Okay, so many of you put in responses that they're almost too small to read now, but this is great. This is really interesting. I think Mike, you and your team will enjoy going through this and seeing all the ideas that are in there.
One of the things I plan to do is eventually use this as a poster, and this will show up somewhere in the bakery. This will be somewhere in the entrance. We will have this as a poster, and it'll be sort of, this is what the neighborhood wanted to see, and this is beautiful.
Yeah. So if you see anything in there you want to emphasize, the more times it gets submitted, the bigger it gets. So this is great. So we hope to be wrapped up here in the next 15 minutes or so, but I wanted to, we'd reference some of the environmental due diligence that had been done. I wanted to give Metric Environmental a chance to summarize the environmental conditions on site and kind of what the next steps are with that. So Vince, why don't you introduce yourself and take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Leah. So, my name is Vince Epps. I'm the Vice President of Metric Environmental, and I'm the consultant team leader. And I have been involved in environmental consulting and government for about 27 years, and have been a Superfund remedial project manager, and have worked on the cleanup of Superfund sites in the area. And I've been working on brownfield sites for about the past 10 years. So very excited to be working with MACOG and with the developers with Ward Bakery as well. So I'm going to talk about the environmental for a little bit here, but the good news is that we're talking about advancing development, which means that the environmental is not a showstopper here. So I'll go over some of the environmental conditions that we've seen, but I'll be brief in the best interest of time, again, because they're not showstoppers. So basically what we do is we've done an environmental assessment, phase 1 and phase 2. We look for asbestos and we look for lead. The slides will go through some of this, but I won't read those word for word for you, just give you a quick summary of what we found. So, and when we did the phase 1, we look at government records, some history, and we do a visual walk through the site. If we find what we call a recognized environmental condition, we'll go out and we'll investigate those in what's called a phase 2. So we did do that. We found some conditions that we thought needed to be investigated. So we went out and we did some soil borings, and we collected some soil samples and some groundwater samples. And we also went inside of the building and we collected some asbestos samples, and we already had some information in terms of lead for the building. And so I'll start with the building first. There is asbestos in the building. Given the age of the building, that wasn't a surprise to us, and that for any renovations for the building, some asbestos will have to be abated. The same thing with lead. So none of that none of that's a showstopper, and none of that was surprising to us. When we took some soil borings on the outside of the building, we only found some lead in the south part of the building where the triangular lot is, and one boring, and it was a fairly shallow boring, but it was above screening IDEM RCG screening levels. And we also found a little bit of PAHs as well in that same boring at a relatively shallow depth. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're engaged in a further site investigation to basically delineate, see if we have any more of those constituents that are out there. But again, the levels weren't high enough to preclude redevelopment at the site. So at the end of the day, what generally happens is that those materials in the soil can be removed, or they can be covered up, because at the end of the day, what you want to do is remove the risk. In terms of the asbestos and the lead in the building, again, asbestos abatement, lead abatement for renovation and redevelopment of that building. So again, no showstoppers there. If there are any questions, certainly you can ask us at the end of this presentation. But again, in the interest of time, that is pretty much the story and the issue with the environmental conditions out there. So again, no showstoppers, and redevelopment can continue. The redevelopment ideas can continue, and we can get something out there at that site that we're looking at and talking about today.
Great, thanks, Vince. I just wanted to reference the map here quickly so that everyone can see the boring you were talking about.
Sure.
Was number 4, I believe, where there was some lead found there.
Yeah, that's
One of
yeah,
the
that-
interesting, I guess the good news is that when we were looking at this dry cleaner and old filling station up here
Yes.
by California, we didn't find any evidence of sort of a plume or any impacts that there's something there that's leaking and spreading. That was one of the potential risks. So that was, in my words, I guess, good news that we didn't find that. So
Yeah, we didn't find any spread. And generally we're looking at groundwater for that, and we did not find any of those types of constituents in the groundwater. So we were very happy about that. And that's very fortunate for forwarding the development.
all right. So just these are going to be in here for future reference. We're going to put the slides up on the website. You can see some examples and descriptions of what type of asbestos was found. And the lead-based paint survey was not done under this grant. It was done previously as part of the activities that Kathy referenced. So we put a reference to that. And all these documents can be found on MACOG's website if you want to read these reports. They're all public record. If you go to the Regional Brownfields portal and click on these sites, you'll have access to all these documents if you wish. I don't know if, Mike, you want to say a couple words about next steps for the abatement side?
Well, basically, where we're at now is, this was a tax sale. So we acquired a building from the county, which means that we have done everything we need to do in terms of that process. We had until October 9th to give them a final yes or nay, and we gave that to them. Then they have to do a petition because this building is being taken from the Ford family and put into our hands. And so that will be the end of December, end of November, beginning December, we expect to take possession, which means we'll actually get the deeds. That means we can start to do the legal work. Phase one really is go in, first of all, do the environmental abatement, get rid of the asbestos. That's the number one thing we've got to do, so it's safe for folks to go in. Then to go in and clean out everything, and that'll be cleaning out all the construction debris, and a lot of it has some lead paint on it or other things that we just don't need. We're gonna basically take everything out of the building except for the walls. Replace the roof, repair what we need to of some of the facade, and then stabilize the building, get some electricity, water, and heat in there, and start to identify tenants. We'd love to have, our dream would be to have, say, 20 to 25% of the tenants that are eventually going to be there, lined up and ready to get in late summer, so that we can actually start to build out and start, with healthy rents coming in. As I say, what makes this building work is our ability to attract people in here who are willing to pay the lease, because the lease is what's going to pay for the environmental abatement, for the new roof, for the facade, and for the build out inside. I mean, it's really all about numbers. Can we make these numbers work? And I believe we can. I mean, we all believe we can, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this. I don't know if Greg or Monty, you have anything else you want to add about sort of next steps. That's phase one, clean it up, turn it into a vanilla box, and start building it out.
I think the only thing I would add, Mike, is, Monty's vision down at Tyler Station is a model that we've looked at. And of course, every project is different. Every existing building is different. I think the one thing that is clear is we can't not sort of understand the building. And I know that in our assessment and understanding what's there and what problems exist and what needs to be done, is key. And so we brought in our consultant team, contractors to provide initial assessments. All of that is part of the process, and in order to understand, address what needs to be done, and to take it to a point where we've got a stable envelope and finished space, and we can bring in tenants. I think Monty also talked about this as part of the finished project. Once the space is fitted out and you have tenants, all of a sudden you have a culture in the building, and things start to happen above and beyond just people sort of doing their own thing, and that is self-sustaining and is sustainable, and it really, I think, is going to ripple throughout the rest of the neighborhood.
Great.
Monty.
I just ditto, it's, you think of your friends and family and people in the neighborhood that always wanted to start something or try something, and then think of us, because we're in a position right now that we can actually nearly put somebody in business. So if somebody said, I want to start a business, and they've got a good skill, they don't maybe have to have, all the money or the financing in the world, that we're able to amortize that finish out and those expenses in the longer term of the building to get the right people in there. So we're really looking for people. We're really looking for those local skills and crafts. And that's what will make this special. We won't make it special. The people that are in this building will make it special.
Great. Thank you so much. I know it's getting a little late, so we're going to wrap up here. Just want to say a couple words on my end. We are also accepting sites of interest if there are any other sites in the community or the region that folks would like grant funding to be spent on to investigate environmental issues. Also want to put up some web pages where you can find more information about brownfields. Where you can find the regional brownfields portal is on the MACOG brownfields website. It's the first link. And then you can find general information about financing through the Indiana Brownfields program, and just general EPA fact sheets that are available in both Spanish and English. Here's contact information, so you can reach out to me or to Mike, whoever the question's most appropriate for, to carry this conversation forward after today. And if you don't have a chance to write this all down, I put my email address in the chat. I'm going to put it in there again so you can copy that and email me, and I can connect you to whoever was on the call today that you would like to speak with. And Mike just put his information in there. So it is getting a little late. I wanted to take one question and then see if there's anything else urgent that anyone wants to type in. But Mike, someone asked about the 800 block of Portage and what your plans are for that, and they referenced kind of the previous commercial build out along the street and whether there's a chance of that coming back.
Right now what we're looking at is perhaps a little bit of commercial just across the street, and then perhaps moving on to some more residential. But quite frankly, as Monty was saying, at this point, the neighborhood and what happens will tell us what's going to happen there. We don't have hard, fast plans. With the city, we're working with the city because the city actually owns that property, to say, look, this is the basis that we're going to do, and the leasing we would do would be put some residential along there. If we find out that there's a demand for more intense and some additional commercial, then we would do that. Right now, my guess is that the additional commercial is going to be across the street on that same block. But we really don't know for sure, but we certainly would be open to that. And again, 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, folks probably weren't imagining that we might be able to turn this back into a business cultural arts center, right? So where we are, say, 18 months to 2 years from now, which is when we would start taking a look down at that area, that might give us a chance to think about those things. But right now we were thinking more residential with maybe a little additional commercial.
Yeah. I do see one question about a fire station at Forest and Portage that looks like it had some landscaping and concrete work recently done. Does anyone, Kathy, is that a question you can answer?
I can maybe touch on that, Kathy.
You probably know, Greg, of course. You've been working on that.
Yeah, so we're the architect on the project. So our developer client has an apartment on the second floor, an office on the back of the second floor, and then the first floor is fitted out as a small restaurant. They've been close to landing a couple times here in the last 6 months, a possible restaurant tenant, but that hasn't happened as of my last communication with them. That's the goal. That's what the Ruffin is set up to do. And as you can tell, it's gone a little slower than they'd like, but the exterior is pretty close to being wrapped up. They've wanted to do that very carefully because they know it's a special building, and we're excited about that node a little closer, towards town.
It really looks amazing.
Yeah, it's been fun to see it progress.
Cool memories as the theater, for sure.
All right. Well, I think everyone who wanted to has had a chance to send me their email address if they want me to follow up with them. So thank you all for your patience and your engagement throughout this and this new model of interaction here. So there's Kathy's email if you'd like to reach out to Kathy and follow up on anything that's not quite related just to the Ward Bakery building. So thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting, and I look forward to sharing some updates as this project starts to develop. Thanks, everyone.